Most people respond to evil in three harmful ways: by becoming equally cruel, by placing themselves in a permanent victim role, or by completely denying that evil exists. However, there is a fourth path, Jung's approach, that not only shields us from the malevolence of others, but also transforms us into stronger and more complete individuals. This is the only truly effective way to face cruelty without losing our essence, without becoming what we hate, and without letting others' darkness define who we are. In this video, I will explain how this psychological response to evil functions, why some individuals become repeated targets of cruel behavior, and most importantly, I will introduce the method Jung developed to turn these encounters into opportunities for growth and inner strength. Stay until the end, because this may be the moment you finally understand the most effective way to deal with human cruelty, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. To begin, we need to understand what actually happens when we face another person's malevolence. Jung noted that true evil is not merely the absence of good. It is an active and intentional force that seeks to harm, dominate, and create suffering. It is essential to distinguish between poor behavior caused by pain, ignorance, or immaturity, and genuine evil, which is deliberate, calculated, and often sadistic. When you encounter a truly malevolent person, a specific psychological sequence unfolds. First comes shock, the inability to believe someone could act with such conscious destructiveness. Then comes confusion, as the mind searches for logical explanations for behavior that contradicts basic assumptions about human nature. Finally, a deep sense of threat emerges, not only physical, but existential, as if your very being is under attack. Jung understood that this process is not only psychological, but also archetypal. When we encounter evil embodied in another person, we come into direct contact with the collective shadow, the darkest elements of humanity that we prefer to ignore. This confrontation awakens not only fear, but also our own personal shadow, the repressed, destructive tendencies within us that can be stirred by the presence of evil. This is why many individuals, when faced with real cruelty, feel an urge to respond with similar behavior. It is not because they are inherently bad, but because evil activates parts of them that usually remain dormant. In this sense, evil can seem contagious, influencing even those who were initially its victims. Jung warned that this is one of the greatest dangers in confronting evil, its ability to corrupt even good individuals by awakening their shadow. The second common reaction is ongoing victimization. In this state, a person identifies so deeply with being a victim that they lose their ability to respond actively. They become trapped not only by what they experienced, but by their interpretation of it. Jung observed that when someone fully adopts the victim identity, they unintentionally give their personal power to the aggressor, allowing that influence to persist even in the absence of the original source of harm. The third reaction is denial, where individuals refuse to accept that real evil exists, attempting to justify or minimize clearly destructive behavior. This often happens because acknowledging true evil forces a confrontation with uncomfortable truths about human nature, truths many would rather avoid. However, this denial is equally risky, as it leaves a person exposed to future harm from malevolent individuals. None of these three responses provides a real solution. The first turns you into what you oppose. The second leaves you stuck and powerless. The third makes you vulnerable. Jung proposed a fourth approach, more demanding but far more effective: the conscious integration of encounters with evil as part of the individuation process. This perspective begins with recognizing that even painful encounters with evil can offer insight into deeper aspects of human nature that usually remain hidden. It is through facing evil that we come to understand the true value of good, not as an abstract idea, but as a deliberate and conscious choice. Jung observed that individuals who have never encountered real evil often develop a form of goodness that is naive and fragile, easily breaking under pressure. In contrast, those who confront evil consciously, without becoming corrupted by it, cultivate a stronger and more resilient goodness, one that acknowledges the existence of darkness, but still chooses the light. This transformation is not automatic. It requires deliberate psychological effort, which Jung referred to as opus contra naturam, a process that goes against our natural instincts to fight, flee, or freeze. It demands courage, clarity, and the ability to maintain integrity even when facing forces that attempt to destroy it. Before learning this process, it is important to understand why some individuals repeatedly become targets of malevolent behavior, while others seem naturally protected. Jung identified a set of psychological traits common among those who often find themselves in such situations. These traits make them both appealing and vulnerable to harmful individuals, and understanding them is key to breaking the cycle of repeated victimization. The first trait is a highly developed feeling function. These individuals experience emotions deeply, not only their own, but also those of others. They possess strong empathy, allowing them to intuitively sense pain, need, and suffering. While this sensitivity is valuable, it also makes them noticeable to emotional predators who can recognize and exploit this openness. Such individuals often assume that others share their emotional depth, projecting their own compassion onto people who may not possess it. They struggle to accept that someone could intentionally cause harm without reason, as it contradicts their own nature. This unconscious projection creates vulnerability, as they cannot anticipate behaviors outside their emotional framework. The second trait is an excessive sense of responsibility. These individuals tend to take responsibility not only for their own actions, but also for the reactions and feelings of others. When mistreated, they often question what they did wrong or how they could have behaved differently. This inclination toward self-blame acts as a signal for manipulators and abusers, who quickly learn to exploit it. Jung noted that this pattern often develops in childhood, where taking responsibility for others' problems may have served as a survival mechanism. However, in adulthood, it becomes a weakness, allowing others to shift accountability for their harmful actions. The third trait is an unconscious need to prove worth through helping and healing others. These individuals are naturally drawn to people who appear hurt, misunderstood, or in need of support. They build their identity around being useful, making a difference, and offering understanding where others cannot. Although this motivation is rooted in good intentions, it places them directly in situations where they can be exploited. Truly malevolent individuals are particularly skilled at recognizing and manipulating this need. They often present themselves as vulnerable in ways that trigger a caring response. Once trust is established, they begin a gradual pattern of exploitation that can continue for years, maintaining the illusion that they are simply misunderstood and in need of help. The fourth trait is a tendency to give others the benefit of the doubt, even when clear evidence suggests otherwise. These individuals prefer to see the good in people and frequently justify destructive behavior as a result of pain, trauma, or difficult circumstances. They have a strong capacity to rationalize actions that should not be justified, always searching for explanations that preserve their belief in the fundamental goodness of human nature. While this reflects a hopeful outlook, It also keeps them exposed to harmful situations far longer than is healthy. While individuals with lower empathy may quickly recognize patterns of harmful behavior and step away, these people continue searching for explanations and solutions, allowing the abuse to persist and even escalate. Jung recognized that when these four traits are not consciously integrated, they form a specific psychological profile that malevolent individuals learn to detect and exploit. It is almost as if these individuals carry an invisible message that says, "I can be influenced. I will take the blame. I will try to fix you. I will give endless chances." Emotional predators, in turn, develop a strong ability to identify and respond to this pattern. However, the key point is this: none of these traits are inherently negative. Sensitivity, responsibility, compassion, and hope are all valuable qualities that enable genuine love, deep connections, and meaningful contributions to life. The issue is not the traits themselves, but the absence of conscious shadow integration, which would allow these qualities to be expressed with awareness, balance, and protection. When a person develops what Jung described as an integrated shadow, they retain these strengths while also gaining the ability to recognize and respond effectively to evil. Their sensitivity evolves into discernment. Their compassion is supported by clear boundaries. Their hope matures into wisdom rather than naivety. This conscious integration of the shadow is what enables a person to respond to evil in a way that both protects and strengthens them. Jung outlined this integration as a structured process, developed through years of clinical observation and self-reflection. The first step is what Jung called recognizing projected shadow. This involves learning to distinguish between ordinary flawed behavior and genuine malevolence, while also separating your own emotional reactions from the other person's destructive intent. Malevolent individuals often confuse their targets about the source of problems. They cause you to question your perception, your judgment, and even your sense of self. They project their own harmful tendencies onto you, making you feel responsible for conflicts you did not create and guilty for reactions that are natural under pressure. Jung referred to this as shadow projection, where the aggressor unconsciously transfers their own darkness onto the victim. Becoming aware of this pattern is freeing, as it allows you to stop accepting responsibility for issues that do not belong to you. If someone consistently behaves in a manipulative, harmful, or exploitative way, and you find yourself repeatedly wondering what you did wrong or how to fix things, it is likely you are facing this dynamic. Jung suggested breaking this pattern through what he called withdrawal of projection, consciously refusing to take back the shadow placed on you, maintaining clarity about your intentions, and recognizing that the other person's behavior is their responsibility. This process requires developing what Jung described as the internal observer, the part of the mind that can step back and evaluate situations with emotional distance. This perspective allows you to see patterns that are otherwise hidden during intense emotional experiences. The internal observer asks clear and grounded questions. What is actually happening here? What patterns are repeating? Is this person accountable for their actions, or do they constantly shift blame? Is there real change, or only excuses and empty promises? After interacting with this person, do I feel supported and valued, or drained and doubtful of myself? The second step is ego strengthening through the conscious integration of your own shadow. Although it may seem counterintuitive, responding effectively to external evil requires acknowledging your own capacity for destructive impulses. Every person carries the potential for both constructive and harmful behavior. The distinction between ethical and malevolent individuals lies not in the absence of negative impulses, but in the conscious decision not to act on them. When you completely deny your shadow, when you see yourself only as good and incapable of negative thoughts, you become more vulnerable to those who have embraced their darker tendencies. Jung observed that individuals who have never faced their own capacity for harm often feel overwhelmed when confronted with real cruelty because they cannot understand or anticipate it. They may also project their own moral standards onto others who operate by entirely different values, so integrating the shadow does not mean acting destructively. It means acknowledging feelings such as anger, resentment, or the desire for control, while choosing not to be governed by them. This awareness develops what Jung called the discriminative function, the ability to recognize similar traits in others and respond with clarity. A person with an integrated shadow is not shocked by the existence of evil. They neither deny it nor become paralyzed by it. Instead, they recognize it and respond consciously, guided by their values rather than by automatic emotional reactions. The third step involves developing what Jung described as an active ethical response. This goes beyond personal defense and involves taking a clear and conscious position against harmful behavior while remaining aligned with your principles. It does not always require direct confrontation, as that may not be safe or effective in every situation. Rather, it means refusing to support or tolerate harmful dynamics through silence, denial, or passive involvement. An active ethical response can take different forms. It may involve setting firm and non-negotiable boundaries. It may mean stepping away from toxic environments, even if that leads to temporary isolation. It can include documenting harmful behavior for protection, seeking help from appropriate authorities, or simply removing yourself from situations that cannot be improved. What defines this response is that it comes from conscious decision-making based on clear values, not from impulsive emotional reactions. Jung emphasized that when responses come from inner integrity rather than fear or unresolved wounds, they carry a transformative quality. This approach is also sustainable over time. Acting from chosen values allows you to maintain consistency without emotional exhaustion, because your actions reflect your true identity rather than a reactive state. The fourth and perhaps most demanding step is finding transformative meaning in the experience of evil. Jung believed that all human experiences, even the most painful, contain the potential for growth and expanded awareness. This does not mean minimizing suffering or suggesting that painful experiences should be appreciated. Rather, it involves recognizing that wisdom and strength can emerge even from destructive encounters. Finding meaning requires shifting the central question from, "Why did this happen to me?" to, "What can I learn from this about human nature, about my own resilience, and about my values?" This shift moves a person from a passive role into an active process of understanding their own life. Jung observed that individuals who find meaning in such experiences often develop deep compassion, insight, and resilience. They do not become bitter or cynical. Instead, they cultivate a mature form of hope, one that acknowledges the existence of harm but continues to believe in the possibility of good. They also become capable of supporting others who face similar challenges, transforming their own experiences into a source of guidance and healing. This transformation does not remove the pain of the original experience, but it places it within a broader context of personal development and contribution. In this way, an encounter with evil, while deeply difficult, can become part of a larger process of growth and understanding, an initiation into deeper awareness of both human nature and oneself. The fifth and final step is developing what Jung called discriminative compassion. This stage represents the integration of all the previous steps, the ability to keep an open heart without becoming naive, to offer support without turning into a victim, and to love without losing clarity. Discriminative compassion recognizes that not everyone is at the same level of moral or psychological development. Some individuals genuinely struggle with harmful patterns, but have both the ability and willingness to change. Others, however, have consciously chosen harmful paths and show no real interest in growth or responsibility. This form of compassion allows you to distinguish between these two groups and respond appropriately. With those in the first group, it may involve patience, encouragement, and opportunities for growth, always supported by firm boundaries that protect your well-being. With those in the second group, it may require protecting yourself and others through clear limits, appropriate consequences, or complete distance. Jung viewed the development of discriminative compassion as a sign of true psychological and spiritual maturity. It is easy to show kindness when it costs nothing, and just as easy to set boundaries when you feel no connection. But maintaining both an open heart and strong boundaries at the same time, offering care without accepting harm, and being kind without becoming naive, requires conscious integration of opposing aspects of human nature. People who develop this ability become genuine sources of healing in the world. They do not continue cycles of harm because they respond to wrongdoing with awareness, rather than reacting with more negativity. They do not remain trapped in victimhood because they preserve their sense of agency even in difficult situations. And they do not deny reality because they are willing to face uncomfortable truths directly. The process of learning to respond effectively to evil is long and often challenging. There are no shortcuts or instant solutions. However, Jung observed that those who commit to this work not only protect themselves from future harm, but also develop qualities that enrich every area of their lives. When you learn to respond to evil while maintaining your integrity, you discover a form of strength that does not depend on external conditions. You build confidence in your ability to stay aligned with your values, even under pressure. You realize that your goodness is not fragile or dependent on others. It is a conscious choice you can sustain regardless of how others behave. This realization is deeply freeing. It means your inner stability, your sense of worth, and your ability to contribute positively cannot be destroyed by someone else's actions. You become truly independent from the influence of others' negativity, not because you avoid it, but because you have developed the inner capacity to face it without losing yourself. Jung believed that this kind of individual development is essential not only for personal well-being, but also for the evolution of collective human awareness. Every person who chooses to respond to harm with clarity instead of continuing destructive cycles contributes to a world where such behavior has less influence. If you have reached this point, you may recognize elements of your own experience in these ideas. You may have identified traits that make some individuals more vulnerable to harmful behavior. You may have noticed patterns in your own responses that have not served you well. Or you may feel encouraged by the realization that there is another way to navigate these challenges. The path Jung described is not simple, but it is meaningful. It requires the courage to face difficult aspects of both yourself and human nature. It requires patience to develop new responses that may initially feel unfamiliar. And it requires trust that it is possible to maintain integrity even in a world where not everyone chooses to act with it. The outcome, however, justifies the effort. When you learn to respond to evil without becoming influenced by it, you gain a level of freedom that few people experience. You become able to form deep connections without constant fear of harm. You can offer genuine help without being easily exploited. You can maintain belief in human goodness while still acknowledging the reality of harmful behavior. Most importantly, you become an example that strength can emerge from adversity, insight can grow from pain, and compassion can develop through difficult experiences. Your life becomes evidence that harmful forces, no matter how real, do not determine the limits of human growth or contribution. Jung taught that the most difficult aspects of life often carry the greatest potential for development, but only if we face them consciously, rather than allowing them to control us. The challenges you have encountered were not random. They can serve as difficult but meaningful steps toward deeper understanding and compassion. The only effective way to deal with evil is to develop a form of goodness that is not naive, a compassion that is not unprotected, and a strength that is not harsh. This growth does not happen in spite of difficult encounters, but through how you choose to respond to them. While you cannot control whether you will face harmful situations, you can control your response. And that choice, repeated over time, shapes both your life and your impact on others. If this message connected with your experience and you recognized something meaningful in your own journey, share in the comments. I choose to respond with wisdom. This helps reinforce the idea that the only real way to overcome evil is by refusing to let it define you. The transformation Jung described does not occur instantly. It is a continuous process of conscious decisions, honest reflection, and gradual development. Each step brings you closer to a way of living that is both strong and compassionate, grounded and understanding, thoughtful and kind. And this way of living is not only a personal achievement, it is something you contribute to the world around you. If you want to continue this journey of growth and inner strength, there are additional resources available to support you. One is 21 Days of Transformation with Carl Jung, a structured guide that walks you through practical methods for shadow integration, strengthening the ego, and developing discriminative compassion. Another is the Soul Survival Manual, designed for those facing genuinely harmful environments, offering practical psychological strategies to maintain clarity, avoid absorbing negativity, and safely exit destructive situations while preserving dignity and inner balance. You can find the link in the first pinned comment of the video. Thank you for staying until the end, for your willingness to explore challenging aspects of human nature, and for choosing growth instead of mere survival. The world benefits from individuals who respond to darkness with awareness, not with naivety, but with wisdom. See you in the next video.